Now, I mentioned Sheamus and Bobby Lashley, maybe as potential WrestleMania opponents for Drew McIntyre. But if they want a marquee name, because that's the rumor, that's the scuttlebutt, that they want up to 4 big marquee matches at WrestleMania this year, so they can have 2 on night 1 and 2 on night 2, which kind of makes sense. The name that I pitched a couple of weeks ago was John Cena, who could return and challenge Drew McIntyre and go for title number 17. If Cena, though, is to be believed, he will not be at WrestleMania this year. Which, if that happens, this would be the first WrestleMania that he would miss since WrestleMania 19, as far as physically being there in person, either for a match or a segment. Even WrestleMania 32, he was injured, but he did show up, and they did a little something with him and The Rock and the Wyatts. So if he does not show up at WrestleMania this year, this will be the first time since 2003 that John Cena is not a part of WrestleMania. Now, in an interview with Sports Illustrated, Cena said that he is going to be in Canada. He is, I guess, already right now in Canada, filming the DC comic show Peacemaker for HBO Max. Peacemaker is the character he plays in the Suicide Squad sequel that's due out later this year, which Cena describes the character as a douchey Captain America. But he is right now in Vancouver shooting the series and says that, given the COVID quarantine regulations, if he were to leave Canada, upon return, he would have to quarantine for another 2 weeks, which would effectively shut down production. And since they want him to be, there filming until July, I think that's the plan, is that he'll be up there filming until the middle of the summer. He says right now there's no logistical way for him to appear at WrestleMania unless it's some kind of pre-taped segment. They could do some kind of cinematic match with John Cena where they fly one of the WWE guys up to Vancouver, find like an empty building or something. That's not going to happen. And I know a lot of people are already calling BS on this. Cena has done this before. He has said that he won't be at WrestleMania, or he won't be here, he won't be there. And then he shows up, and it's a big surprise. But see, that's different. That's for an appearance. If he is going to have a match, and especially if he was going to have a WWE title match against Drew McIntyre, he needs to be on TV to promote it. He also needs to do something to earn the match. He probably needs to win the Elimination Chamber. And I don't think that's going to happen. Plus, if he's the lead of this series, which it sounds like he is, he is Peacemaker on this TV show, there's probably no way they would risk him getting hurt in a regular match. So I take him at his word this time. I don't think it looks good at all for John Cena being on the WrestleMania card this year. And if that's the case, what that does then is it opens the door for somebody else. Now, it is still possible that Edge could choose Drew McIntyre, and it could be Edge and Drew for the title. That's not the match I would do. Let's say Edge does not choose him. Let's say I'm right, and Edge picks Roman Reigns, and Drew McIntyre has no obvious opponent. What do you do? Sheamus is the most logical choice at the moment if they want to drag this thing out a little bit. I floated Lashley's name a little while ago. There's a few other names to think about. Keith Lee, who I actually think there's a better chance of Keith Lee challenging Lashley for the U.S. title. But if not, Keith Lee's name has to be on that list. He's been off television now for weeks. I know his girlfriend had COVID. Hopefully he didn't, but we don't have any kind of update on him. He could be back on TV tomorrow night. But he was not at the Rumble, and I think he's missed 3 weeks, I believe, of Monday Night Raw. Maybe it's an injury. He did take a nasty bump. I think it was a power bomb on the edge of the announce desk in that match he had on Legends Night with Drew McIntyre. But I'm almost positive he was on TV the following week. And I think from that episode on, we haven't seen him. But let's assume he'll be back soon. I think Keith Lee is on the list. What about AJ Styles? In my plans when I listed these potential marquee matches, I had AJ earmarked for a match with Triple H. Now, if Triple H is not wrestling, which would shock me, but if he's not, then AJ has no match. And then there's another name that I think some people are forgetting, but he just came back at the Royal Rumble. Well, he came back on SmackDown, but he came back in the Royal Rumble match, and that's Braun Strowman, who was going to face Drew McIntyre for the title at TLC until he got hurt, and so they put AJ in that spot instead. We could very well be heading to a Drew McIntyre versus Braun Strowman WWE Championship match at WrestleMania, which is a match that I do not want to see. But it's a pretty wide open field right now, assuming that Edge chooses Roman Reigns as he should. Which takes us to SmackDown. Some thoughts on that show. Roman was there and he wanted an answer from Edge because he knew Edge was going to be there. He wanted an answer on what his decision was going to be as far as which title he would be challenging for at WrestleMania. He gave him until the end of the night to give him an answer. Reigns and Heyman, I thought, were great in the opening segment. When Roman snapped, he was speaking very low, and then all of a sudden he snapped, and he's screaming, and he says, why is this man playing games with me? This is when Edge, they informed Heyman that Edge was not yet at the building, and Heyman had to go break the news to Roman that Edge is not here yet. So Roman ends up out of nowhere just snapping, why is he playing games? Why are you playing games with me? And you see Heyman in the background, just like, it's like a jump scare. Heyman always looks absolutely terrified. He walks on eggshells around Roman Reigns. They close the show with Roman Reigns coming out to confront Edge and force him to acknowledge him as the main event of WrestleMania. And I'm thinking, if Edge really wanted to screw over Roman Reigns, he would pick Drew McIntyre just to deny Roman Reigns from getting the main event spot at WrestleMania. A spite pick. Drew McIntyre could be Edge's spite pick for WrestleMania. But before Edge could give his answer or say anything, Kevin Owens dropped Roman with a stunner. I am just about done with this already. I am done with Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens. It was good. It was very good. We got a great TLC match out of it. We got a cage match out of it. We got a last man standing match out of it. Roman won all three of them. I think we're done here. Maybe if there's an elimination chamber match and Roman defends the title or something, maybe they'll be in there. Maybe they'll open the chamber. But as far as this whole feud and doing another match, there's no need. We've seen every kind of match that you can do with these two. Roman has won every single one of them. It's time to move on. Edge should pick Roman Reigns. And I think some people assume, people who may not like that idea, they assume that if Edge wrestles Roman, well, that means Roman Reigns is going to lose. That means he's going to lose the Universal title at WrestleMania. And what a terrible thing it would be for Roman to lose his title to Edge. I've never said, not one time, that Edge should beat Roman Reigns and win the Universal title. Not once. The good guy does not always win in the end. You can tell the Edge story of redemption with him coming back from injury and winning the Royal Rumble and getting his championship match at WrestleMania, but falling short. Roman Reigns should not be dropping the title right now. But that does not mean that it still should not be Roman Reigns against Edge at WrestleMania. Look at who Roman has beaten so far in this run. 3 people. Jey Uso, Drew McIntyre, and Kevin Owens. Now he can add a legend to that list. And if it can't be The Rock, because they can't do the match this year, Edge would be just fine. And think about it like this, too. If Edge feuds with Roman, what do you do on TV in the weeks before to really start hyping up and building up the match? It gives them a reason to book a pretty cool, fantasy tag team match, if they want to, on that Fastlane pay-per-view next month. And they can do Edge and Christian against the Usos. They can do that match at Fastlane next month because Christian came back in the Royal Rumble match, and Christian's been teasing that he may not be done either. So I'm sure we have not seen the last of Christian. It would be booking malpractice for him to come back and both guys to come back and not do at least one Edge and Christian reunion match at some point. So it's going to happen. The Usos have been, if not the best, one of the top 2 best tag teams in the company in the last 10 years. Jimmy Uso was supposed to either come back or he was hoping to be back from his injury, his ACL injury in January. We are now in February. I've heard no updates on his status. I would have to assume that if he's not already cleared, he's probably pretty close. It's a pretty safe bet that I think Jimmy Uso would be physically ready by next month to be back in the ring. And if that's the case, there you go. On the road to WrestleMania, as Edge prepares to challenge the Tribal Chief, first he must team up with his best friend to take on 2 members of the Samoan dynasty, 2 members of Roman's family, Jimmy and Jay. We get a neat little fantasy tag team match out of the whole deal.